My name's Amata, and in this Red Gaming Tech video, I am here to talk about loot boxes. Yep, this conversation ain't going anywhere anytime soon, my friends, especially now that the government is involved thanks to the whole Star Wars Battlefront 2 kerfuffle. Now, obviously, the controversy surrounding that game kicked off a chain of events that has seen responses from various governmental bodies, the main one, of course, being that now infamous video from Hawaii, and of course we've had lukewarm responses from the UK Gambling Commission and so on, but now the conversation has moved to Washington State, as a group of 3 Democratic state senators have introduced a bill that basically is going to make the Gambling Commission actually examine loot boxes and determine, quote, whether games and apps containing these mechanisms are considered gambling under Washington law. So literally all this is, hey Gambling Commission, can you please take a look at these loot boxes, because we need to officially decide if we should be regulating these as we would gambling. You know, are they gambling under Washington law? And I have a bit of a statement here from the bill co-author Kevin Ranker, who spoke to the Tacoma News, Tribune, and he said, quote, what the bill says is, industry state, sit down to figure out the best way to regulate this. It is unacceptable to be targeting our children with predatory gambling masked in a game with dancing bunnies or something. So, the bill in question basically poses 2 main things that are to be considered by the Gambling Commission. Now, this hasn't gotten to that point, but if it is, it does put forth 2 points. Basically, they're questioning whether or not children who, quote, may be more vulnerable to gambling addiction should be even allowed to have access to these games. And obviously, that part of the bill would, if the Gambling Commission even have to consider this officially, and then even if they, decide in favour, like, hey, we're right, we need to regulate this, the part that's going to hit the most is, of course, the mobile gaming industry, as, there's a ton of really good mobile games. But as we all know, there are also a metric ton of games on the mobile gaming sphere that are there purely to get micropayments out of children who perhaps have found a way to pay with their parents' credit card because their parent didn't realise that their credit card details have been saved or whatever. We've had numerous cases where like thousands of pounds or dollars or whatever it happens to be of money has been racked up by a child who probably doesn't realise what they're doing, money wise. And the bill is also going to look at transparency around, quote, the odds of receiving each type of virtual item. Now, obviously, we have seen this done already with various things. Apple required these odds to be posted alongside games with loot boxes. And of course, we saw the loot box probabilities revealed for Overwatch, at least in China. So we have seen this sort of thing before. Now, as I keep stressing, actual government regulation is a ways off. Now, obviously, the bill needs to be approved by the full Washington State legislature and be signed by the governor before it even hits the Gambling Commission's desk. At that point, the commission would then obviously, consider everything and then make any recommendations for any regulations or anything like that it wants to address with loot boxes. Now, I've said in the past, and I will continue to say, that loot boxes are gambling. They are. It doesn't really make sense to me how people can say that they're not, because they are. How bad the gambling is depends on what you're gambling for, but it is still gambling. You're still pulling the virtual lever, hit the lever and all that to get the skin or whatever it happens to be that you want. Obviously, how predatory it is also another thing. It being gambling doesn't mean when somebody think of the children. No, I'm just saying, let's just recognise that it's gambling. That doesn't mean it's inherently bad. It just means, hey, we need to make sure it's clear that this is gambling. I don't see how that's a bad thing. It means you can make an adult decision about whether or not you should be taking part in this game, or the loot boxes that are a part of this game. Obviously, you can do that anyway, but I'm just saying more information to the consumer is always a good thing. More clarity is always a good thing. And if we were to get, actual probability on hey, you have a 1% chance to get the skin that you want, at least people are informed. If they then decide to spend $50 or whatever getting that skin or whatever it happens to be, then that's their choice. But you can't say, hey, they weren't informed, because they were. See, I've always think more information and these types of things is a good thing. Loot boxes, I doubt are going anywhere, to be honest. Now, I definitely think that if there is another Star Wars Battlefront 2 level catastrophe, the government will definitely be more, like, prone to being cracking down on them. Both on the UK side, because they were very lukewarm in the whole thing. They basically said, like, at the moment it doesn't fall under gambling laws at the moment. But as I said in my video on it, that basically means that, legislation might have to change for it to be considered, legally gambling. And obviously, we've not really seen any results from anything out of Hawaii, and obviously Belgium as well is getting involved. But if we were to have another level of that, where the sort of seedy underbelly of the exploitation and manipulation, and how the game was weighted and built around the idea of rinsing as much money out of people as possible, again, then we're definitely, I think, would see something more action, I guess, out of governmental bodies, because they can't say, oh, we didn't, this is only a one-time thing, no, this isn't gambling because this is just this game, blah blah blah. Obviously that would not really be good overall, because obviously you don't really want the government getting involved if you can avoid it, to be honest. But I do think there is some regulation required. We just don't want it to be overly excessive is the thing. We don't want it to be like, yeah, any game with loot boxes is now like, adults only, or, R rating or 18 or whatever. That's a bit excessive. I don't want that. But just information. Say, hey, this game has, loot boxes which are gambling, blah, blah, blah. So people are informed. That's it. Make people informed. Make people aware, because unfortunately I don't think loot boxes are going anywhere. Obviously, there's bad ways to do loot boxes, and there's, like, more tolerable way to do loot boxes. I personally would prefer, if excuse me, if you have to have microtransactions in your product, I would rather just buy the thing outright wherever it happens to be. If it's a skin or a spray or whatever, it could be a drawing of a cock, it doesn't really matter. I would rather pay outright for that than get a loot box for it. That's my personal opinion. I would rather just have that. I'd rather there wasn't microtransactions at all in full-price AAA games. I've said many, 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 many times. But since we apparently can't have them anymore without ads, or at least in certain cases, obviously I am exaggerating slightly, I would prefer just to buy the thing outright if you have to have it. Now, I will still fight against them when I feel like they're being overly greedy and overly excessive, like I did with Star Wars Battlefront 2. I will still express my opinion, and obviously I'd really dislike the practice of putting them in AAA games, but despite my exaggeration earlier, it is only a few games that have done it. Majority of games do not have them. Obviously, they are becoming more prevalent, which is a concern, but I definitely think the Star Wars Battlefront 2 thing will have one upside, and that is made developers and publishers, because mainly publishers that seem to be the ones behind this, more cautious about how they go about things. People very much showed their limits. They said, no, fuck this, I'm not dealing with this, I'm not buying your game, this is too much. And we have seen the line that people will not cross. That line is pretty bad, but people, and publishing houses and people in expensive suits went, oh, okay, this is really bad. Like, this could have seen, EA losing the Star Wars license, Disney were getting involved, like, it was a mess. So it's definitely making people think twice, and I think, like, if that hadn't happened, it was going to happen at some point, even if it wasn't Star Wars Battlefront 2. But obviously that's just purely my opinion. So anyway, it's going to be an interesting one. Again, it's going to be a while before we see anything at all come from this. If it even reaches the Gambling Commission, they might just go, no, we don't need to regulate, and that'll be the end of it. And it might not even reach them at all, so we're just going to have to wait and see, unfortunately. But that is me done for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.